There we go. The free time you had something you wanted to bring up?
Yes. I see it in the Discord chat. Movement to REN 2.0 has come up, as I see it, and you consider implementation is the best solution. Or it's the best mention I see it. It seems that there was also a decision about a foundation, but then you would rather prefer implementation, what I read, and I only want to know what are your key features for the implementation, and if it's correct that there was a decision about a foundation, but it's cancelled, or some community member think write something about a foundation. And yes, I only want to know what's the current state, and yes, which way we are walking.
Those two things are separate in a way. So a foundation is something we want to set up regardless, and we've been working on that in the background. It's a lot of paperwork, stuff like that takes time. The idea of the foundation would be to sort of, be one of the main entities that sort of takes care of the REN protocol and the REN ecosystem, like a not for profit entity who's best, or like it wants REN. It wants REN the best. Like it's in the interest of. It only works in the interest of REN. So
And the implementation, it's more for the attract new developers
yes,
and
exactly.
everything.
Yeah, because as REN 2.0 and the sort of EVM layer gets released, obviously you need some kind of incentives for developers to come, because they have
Yeah, sure.
opportunities maybe to deploy in some other chain that's doing like an incentive program. So even if REN offers like these really unique features, there's high competition.
Yes, sure. You need something.
Yeah.
That's fine.
So that's why the inflation thing is sort of being thought about, discussed, designed, because it's a pretty sort of, it's a very natural way to one, get funding for this kind of token incentive program, and two, if you give developers the REN token, their best interest is to, if they deploy something on REN, something that brings value to REN, and in that way perhaps increases their grant. So that's why they're having like incentives in the REN token itself makes the most sense, and then those would have to come from inflations likely.
Yes, that's very nice. And how much implementation? It's like 3, 4, 5, 6%. That's the decision of the REN DAO dark nodes, or it's you from the
we
team
have
make
to
suggest.
make a proposal that's approved by the community. We had an RFC back in
Yes, I know. I think in July or June, something. I know. I think I know what you mean. There was Susfruit. I think he said he don't want to launch a new network layer one without implementation.
Yeah, and that was an RFC. So we're still sort of at that stage. We want to make a new RFC proposal that has more details that the community can, decide on
Yes.
if they make sense. So this is not something the REN team sort of just decides and we do that. We're gonna make a new proposal that has more details, basically on that specific question. How should the
Okay, because
incentive
Susfruit.
program be designed?
Okay, because Susfruit has mentioned something with maybe like the model from Bitcoin, but he don't write much about the details. That's why. So we would have for this maybe a new RFC.
Yeah. So it will be a new
Okay.
RFC that the community will get to discuss and provide feedback and change the proposal or select between a few options, whatever.
Okay,
Yeah,
and the
that would-
foundation is the completely opposite. That's nothing to do with the implementation. The foundation, that's the other side and the other topic.
yeah, but in that sense, they are connected in that the inflation would probably at least partially go to the foundation, so the foundation can be the entity that gives out grants. Because anytime you give out grants, money to whomever, you have to think about stuff like tax, regulatory stuff, and that's why a foundation would be a pretty good entity to handle all of that. So even if the DAO now has an ecosystem fund and it's paid out to grants, I mean, all of this is very loose in terms of, do we have to think about regulatory stuff? Like this DAO is completely international. It's completely, online. There's no incorporation anywhere for the DAO, and we don't know, like in the future, if that's something that governments accept or something. But if you create a foundation that follows all the rules, etc., like that can handle all of the all of the messy stuff with reporting on who's getting money sent, etc.
Yeah, okay, cool. But who, maybe silly question, but who finance the foundation? I think the foundation at the start you need something, and yes, the current community fund are very low. I don't know if it's much enough for a foundation, but yes.
So, I mean, I think in this situation, I mean, perhaps the Rent team sets up the foundation so it's live, and then the inflation is what sort of incentivizes the grant program that the foundation can work on.
Okay.
Yeah.
The money as the tokens from the foundation go straight to the, or in some way to the foundation.
Yeah. So the foundation gets at least part of the inflation, likely, that can then pay out grants in a proper way, and so all the legal stuff is not a concern.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
So like
sounds good.
maybe we want to make maybe the community wants to invest, let's say, just as an example, 2 million in some kind of let's just say like a block explorer. We have a block explorer for rent, so that's not a need. But say like that was something that was needed, and it was something that was expensive, let's say. Then it's when you reach those kinds of levels, like you should, or you have to care about regulatory concerns and tax and stuff. So that's why it makes more sense for the foundation to do that than the community ecosystem fund. But the community ecosystem fund can still exist, and yeah, that does get some funding from Bridge Volume itself. So I mean, we're not going to touch that. The community has full control over that. We'll see how those two things cooperate in the future. That's a problem in the future, if it is even is a problem. I don't think it's a problem at the moment.
Okay. And okay, nice, thank you. My second question is, what is the current status with the WEN IP? I think the last thing is when I hear this, it was a call with Suswood, and that there was currently say that at the moment Alameda owns the WEN IP, and the Alameda should be given to a Swiss association, the WEN IP. But when should this happen, or will there be more?
let me just mute him. But yeah, I get your question. But
So okay.
if you go to the RAN GitHub right now, like a lot of things, like most things are open source, and the like all the RAN 2.0 things will be open source. So the question about IP isn't even, I think, a concern, because it will be open source. So for instance, Ross is working on one of the new MPC algorithm, and that is at least open source, even if there might be a development branch that is private. But you could go to REM project and you can see the Frost repo, which Ross has been working on. There is also, like, one of the things we open source recently was what was it called?
Yeah, okay, then I know what you mean, or I'll read this with Frost and everything else. So that's not like I think there was a post from a REN team and the post was deleted. There was also something written with REN IP some months ago, and then I think you or some other reads that there would be a more common proposal. That's why I ask.
I mean, I don't know exactly what IP encompasses fully, but all the relevant IP, which is the dark node client, like all of the things that makes the bridge work, since they will be open source, most of it sort of is, and the new REN 2.0 things will be, there's like nothing to even, yeah, I don't even know what IP is left after that.
Okay.
So I mean, like, yeah, maybe technically, like, the GitHub access will be transferred, like, to a Swiss foundation, the Cambridge Foundation. Then I don't know how that works, but even then, like, the things are on GitHub. All of it will be on GitHub and open source. So that is the relevant IP. That is the REM protocol. So
Okay. Yeah.
it's not like Alameda owns something here that can just make private like that. That's not a thing. So everything will
Okay.
be on
Yeah.
GitHub.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you can fork it, and someone could make a copy and try to run their own bridge. But I mean, they won't have our community, and they won't have our developers and our DAO, etc. So we're not worried about someone copying and, trying to overtake REN.
Okay. Okay. And then my last question is, as I read much white papers and news and everything else, and what I saw, and it's coming very often, is that most crypto projects have now all few large supporters, as far I can tell, and I think with when it's Alameda, and yes, some big partners. But what surprised me a little bit, or maybe I see it in the wrong way, is that I never read something about that Alameda or Sam FTX. They have all a very big reach. That they write something about REN 2.0 and something else. So we see that they make it with Solana and very great and everything. So they know how to do it. But my question is, maybe I don't understand the partnership with Alameda, or maybe there's something else, but I wonder why it's so quiet. It's sure that I don't want to be the details of the deal. That's normal. That's keep private. But that yes, maybe you know what I mean.
Yeah, but we sort of discussed this in the community a few times. I mean, Alameda is a partner, yes, and we love them. They don't do marketing. Like Alameda doesn't do that. They invest, and then the project have to, I mean, we have to run our own thing. The FTX, and like, yeah, they did talk a lot about Solana, but it was still mostly like the Solana people that did the Solana marketing, if that's what you're wondering about. So then you can turn the question on why isn't, you can turn the question towards maybe why isn't Ren doing, more talking publicly and all of that. And partly it's because we're mostly like a tech team. Maybe not the most outgoing Twitter people, but we can improve on that. Going to conferences, writing more interesting blogs and content, and that is a big part of this is a big change that we will do now as Ren 2.0 gets out. We have to let people know about this new great platform that we're building. So we have, thinking a lot about that, how we can improve, and the community, the DAO, just did a grant to sort of work on this. So that will be very interesting to see, like how Cowboy will experiment in increasing the voice of Ren to the public.
Yeah, sure. I've seen it. It was very nice, and yes. So, in the short term, so Alameda founding Ren Labs, but that's all. They are not coming, yes, marketing or with Ren 2.0. Yes, that's not the part from Alameda.
Yeah, I mean, Alameda doesn't do marketing, so I mean that's up for us. That's up to us. So you also asked about the incentive program before. So you see, if we get an incentive program, then we'll attract a lot of developers to Ren, and then they will do marketing, sort of by building and deploying on Ren. So that's a big sort of powerful state to get in when you have people deploying on the Ren 2.0 platform, because they will want to let users know to use their applications, and that brings people into the Ren ecosystem. So that's also a reason why an incentive program is so important. Because I mean, Ethereum doesn't have to do marketing for itself, right? Because people,
No, sure.
yeah, I mean that's like Curve. People want to use Curve, so that's why they use Ethereum, and that's sort of the state we also want to get to. Like, so there's like Ren doesn't have to say anything. I mean, it's builders and projects on Ren that
Okay.
yeah, make noise.
Yes, so you go the other way. Ren goes away with strategy, with technique, with technology, with safety, and not with hype and marketing.
Yeah, no, but we definitely need to do hype. I mean, we need to hype, or not hype, but we have to inform the public about Ren 2.0. That's very important. We need to let
Attract
people in crypto.
talent, the developer.
Yeah, I mean, the incentive program is a great way, and we have to, do a lot of content on all of the cool and great aspects of Ren, so developers know about them and how to, build something that can make them successful. Compared to other protocols, and show how, if you did this on Ren, you would have a more successful product, because we have such a great protocol. So yeah, a lot of content, documentation, stuff like that. Big important thing
Yes,
now.
that's very important, because what I saw is many people don't know exactly what will Ren 2.0 be, or what is the key feature, what can Ren, and that's very, I think, very nice, and open up a whole new areas. But I think many people don't know this, and that's, I think it's a key to bring this to people, to Builder. What are Ren 2.0? What can you do? And what can you don't what can you do with Ren and not with Solana, Polkadot, and everything else? Because Ren have something unique and very special, but the people, I think, must know that it exists, and they are Ren 2.0.
Yeah, but of course, so as we're developing it right now, we can't say too much because details change, and we can't 100% know how the platform will look yet, but we're getting pretty close. So yeah, right now focus is on documentation, and as soon as we know all of the things that we built out, how they work and how developers will integrate with them, then we'll start creating content and high level overviews and explanations for how this Ren 2.0 works. So we won't do that at the moment because we're still developing it, but we're getting pretty close, and soon after that, when we sort of know that the protocol will basically be like this with some small changes, then we can begin writing these like overviews, showcase all the cool features, how to use it, and spread it around everywhere so people know. So developers, they take a look at Ren at least and see if they want to deploy there.
Okay, and this will also happen in a timely manner with the documentations and everything. When Ren 2.0 is out, then there will also the instruction and everything else.
Yeah, of course.
No, yes, because I think you know it, Mina Foundation, Mina ecosystem. I think they are doing something very interesting. But what you see there is they have something launched, but the documentation, everything else, it's very worst, very, very worst, and very complicated for people. And yes, that's why there are only, I think, 10 or 11 projects on.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally understand and agree with you. So we agree with you, us working on Ren.
Okay, that's good that you know what's the problem. Okay, thank you. Yes, maybe something new or something else. I think at the beginning of the call you asked something with Ross and said he's working on the MPC. Maybe he can tell us something interesting. Yes, something new. I think with the MPC, or it's, don't know. Maybe it's it's all private with Ren 2.0, or I think the SMPC area is also very interesting, and it's, it's a time very quiet. Or you said you cannot talk at the moment about new SMPC features.
I mean, yeah, Ross, you don't have to spill all the secrets, but if there's anything you want to, you can mention and go ahead.
I mean, well, yeah, I can talk about the stuff that's public, I guess. I think is most of it. But let me double check what is public. So like the Frost repo is public, right?
Yeah, latest
I believe
update was 7 days ago, so maybe you have a development branch that is more recent, but
yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, I mean, it's just in the older version of Ren, we had an MPC algorithm that we developed ourselves, and we put a paper out for that But we didn't like how it scaled. Like if we're going to have thousands of nodes, we would need to group up into shards for it to be performant. So we were playing around with trade-offs, and we saw that Frost, which is sort of a fairly recent paper that got published, had quite good scaling. It had some drawbacks, but we decided that it would be good to go with that. And the idea is that we would we don't need to have shards, which simplifies some things, which would be nice, and theoretically sort of more secure, because if there are 3,000 nodes, then we could make it so that you have to corrupt 1,500 or more of them to be able to recover the private key, which would be quite challenging. So that's kind of like the main, I guess, novelty in that realm.
Is the idea that there will be absolutely no shards then?
There still can be, but at least with this, we have the possibility of just having a single shard, basically. Which, like I said, when you split shards up, like say there are 1,000 malicious nodes, I don't know how that would happen. And if you just have one shard, then they can't possibly recover the private key. But if you say break it up into 10 shards, you sort of do that randomly. There's a chance that one of those shards has enough corrupt nodes that they could recover the private key. So it's generally sort of a bit nicer to have a single shard. You can be a bit more secure.
So the MPC algorithm is able to split a key up into 10,000 pieces?
Yeah, like even the one we were using in the previous system could do that, but it just didn't scale as well. So like when you go to do a signature, a distributed signature, if you had like 3,000 nodes, it would take kind of a long time with the old system. But with Frost, it'd be fairly fast, like a couple of seconds or something in terms of computation, I think. So it's like you could always you can break. There's no limit on how many pieces you can break a private key up into in terms of secret sharing.
So is that operation when Ren has to sign something, would that be separate from the Ren EVM layer itself? If there's a catalog on Ren EVM and there's a just a swap between Bitcoin and Ethereum, but it's all sort of contained within Ren EVM, so no Bitcoin is actually sent out to a different address, then the MPC algorithm is not used and there's no scaling issues there.
I'm not 100% sure what that part of the system looks like, but theoretically, every time you need a signature, and you need it to be signed with the distributed key, then Frost will need to be used. But if you don't need a signature, then it doesn't need to be used.
Okay, so then Ren EVM could sort of be like a layer 2 that aggregates a bunch of transactions into just like one signature needed on the dark node level.
Yeah, I don't see why not. But like I said, I'm not super familiar with that part.
Yeah,
how that's going to look like.
But I'm assuming if we have a bunch of applications on Ren EVM, if a signature takes a few seconds, then your TPS wouldn't that be sort of 1 over 3 seconds? So no. Then your TPS would be 0.3 or something if it takes 3 seconds. So that wouldn't be a good design, I guess.
Well, I mean, this is sort of I think those metrics are sort of in the limit. If there were 5,000, 8,000 nodes, all going at once or something. I think with the lower number of nodes, it's faster. And then there's, like you're suggesting, there's also ways to sort of aggregate or like do signatures in a batch. So, but also, I believe, like, even just ignoring all those possibilities, like, say you have a Bitcoin signature you want to do. I mean, a transaction can have multiple, like, move multiple funds from different accounts and things. You will need potentially more than one signature, but like, like what the signature is used for can represent a lot of transactions potentially.
Because, I mean, that's how Optimism and Arbitrum, at least, how they scale. They don't have to post everything to the layer one. They aggregate it, but
yeah.
I guess Susur.
Anyway, like I said, so with like with a smaller number of nodes, like with fewer than 1,000, I think it'll be very fast. And if it turns out that we do have like 8,000 nodes in the system, and it is taking like a couple seconds or something, I mean, we can at that point also again consider sharding to bring the total number the number down in terms of who's participating in a signature, and then we can get performance back that way. So I think there's lots of possibilities.
Is there do you have a graph of how time increases per node?
I just ran some simulations locally. Let me see if I still have them.
Because is it like exponential, or is it linear, or how does it?
Right. I guess I think it'll be probably like n squared.
Yeah. Okay.
Which is kind of what you would expect for MPC algorithm. I'd be surprised if you could do better than n squared in most cases. Let me see.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just put up this file that has it's simulated 3,000 nodes and threshold of what is it? Threshold of 1,500, so like 50% 50 threshold, and it looks like 500 milliseconds on my machine. And if you looked at something like with 300 nodes, then it's down to like 15 milliseconds.
Okay, yeah, that's a massive difference.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when Ren was first conceived, this limit of 10,000 dark nodes was completely arbitrary, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, how many nodes do you need in a decentralized network? Like, how many does Ethereum have? How many does Bitcoin have? Like maybe the 10,000 limit is too high, or you do sharding, as you say, but sharding introduces, I guess, some complexity that's big.
Yeah. It would be good to avoid it, but it's always a possibility.
Yes.
Right now we have 2,000 community nodes. How much would that be, Russ?
I don't know. Without running the simulation again, if I interpolate it, it might be something like, I don't know, 100 milliseconds or something.
Okay.
Hard to guess.
So that's at least 10 TPS, which is more than Bitcoin. So,
yeah.
Okay.
But this is also depends on the machine and everything. These are like very rough numbers.
we know how many how is the max of TPS with REN 2.0, or you can't say at the moment anything about that?
No, so that was exactly what Ross was talking about right now. It depends on how many nodes you have in the network, I guess, and the hardware of the nodes. So to say there were 2,000
Yes, why?
nodes, as I just asked, then it could the MPC algorithm could do 10 signatures per second. That doesn't have to mean like that's what REN EVM can do. It's just how many, like, say there were exactly, say it was only bridging transactions, then it could do 10 of those per second, which is way more than that's likely, or way more than what's going on at the moment. I mean, we maybe have 100 or 200 transactions per day at the moment, so 10 TPS would cover a long way. But if REN, if we would have 5,000 nodes, then maybe we'd have to consider how we can improve those stats. Because then so it depends on the number of nodes and how beefy the nodes are. So there's no like number. You can't say like Bitcoin has exactly one type of TPS, but that's because that's how their consensus mechanism is designed to try to, on average, have a block every 10 minutes. But that's not how REN would work. So it would all depend on node count and how powerful the machines are.
So there's completely different to Solana, Aptos, and all the other blockchains.
I mean, I think they also kind of have similar. They do it in a similar way, and that's why like the Solana hardware requirements are so high. They also it also comes down to consensus mechanism. But Ross, is the MPC itself a consensus mechanism, or how does that? You just need to wait for at least half of all the nodes to sign something.
It's a little different. It's like, there's a series of steps. Like, there's like a couple rounds. First round, everyone sends this kind of message, and the second round, everyone sends this kind of message. They're all sort of just like sending and receiving messages and checking that they're correct and no one's being malicious, and then they do some computations with them, and then they put the result together. So it's not really consensus. I mean, it is sort of in the general sense of the word, but not in the like specific cryptographic sense, I wouldn't say.
So, but does REN then need a separate like consensus protocol, or is that how does that work?
Not yeah, I guess I'm not 100% sure on what the ideas were, but I believe what they've done with the REN chain, or like the Ethereum fork thing. I mean, since they've forked Ethereum, that is like consensus, right? That involves like, I assume that they're using like the Ethereum consensus code. So yeah, that's like consensus code would be in there and be using that, I would presume.
So that potentially add some time to how often the signatures can be done by the dark nodes, if they also have to handle sort of some consensus networking additional.
I mean, potentially, but I mean, they are sort of like generally independent. So almost every machine has like more than one core. So they could, I imagine they would just run in parallel and like wouldn't really step on each other's toes. I don't think it would I wouldn't predict there to be like an additive effect.
So the signature part can only be run on one core, or
No, not necessarily. Just that I was just making the point that, like, the consensus computations they're independent from the
okay,
signature
yeah,
computations in a
okay.
way, so they can run on separate cores and yeah.
Okay, cool. How much bandwidth does sort of Frost use? Like, have you done measures on like how many megabits per second do you need for it to
Yeah.
yeah.
Just have a look. Just let me double check what's in my little simulation. I think it was going to be something on the order of what up? 300, like 100 kilobytes ish per signature. On that order of magnitude.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, most people have at least above 10 megabits per second, so data centers
should be a problem.
So, yeah. But that so say consensus isn't the bottleneck; it's the MPC part. Would then the speed of the network be the median of the slowest part of the whole set? Like, do you understand what I mean?
You're wondering about if different machines have different speeds?
Yeah, so say there's 1,000 machines, and there's 500 that are faster than average, 500 that are slower than average. So would it be the median, like the speed of the median node of the 500? That would be the bottleneck. Would it?
Yeah, I guess roughly. I mean, how it works is usually like there'll be a like you've got 2,000 nodes. There'll be like a sort of random subset of like 1,000 of them that will do any given signature. So it sort of like depends on. So it's a random in that sense. So it depends sort of like if you pick a like subset of really fast machines, then it'll be a bit faster. But in general, you will have to wait a little bit for the slower nodes. But yeah.
Oh, super interesting to hear these details, because we haven't discussed them that much in public.
Yes. So that you can also do with SMPC other things, apps and private calculations and everything else. There must be difference and much change that you can do something with the SMPC, or does it work with the REN 2.0 and the Frost section?
So you're sort of wondering if SMPC can be used to do more general calculations?
Yeah, I think that's what he's wondering. Yeah.
I mean, in general, yes. The problem usually with having a system that can do general calculations in MPC is that it's usually not very efficient. So it's almost always better to have like a specially crafted MPC algorithm to do a certain thing. So that's like what Frost is. Frost is MPC, but it's specially crafted to do signatures. If you took like a general computation MPC algorithm and did like a signature with it, it would be pretty horribly slow. So there's definitely like the opportunity to expand what we do in MPC, but if we're using thousands of nodes, I think generally you'll need to use sort of more specific more specially crafted algorithms to do whatever it is that you want to do.
Oh, nice, thanks.
Could those could the Darknet client have sort of a separate MPC algorithm for so that would be like less intensive? Could those run in parallel then as well? So for those different kinds of tasks?
Well, yeah, I mean, in general, if you have sort of tasks that are independent and they work on like independent data, then you can make them happen in parallel. But then, yeah, it's a matter of scaling up your machine, right? Like, you know, if there's 10 different things you want to be doing at once, you need to have at least 10 cores or whatever. So, yeah.
So is there anything like you think is really cool about Frost, or like some kind of feature that's just I don't know, like pretty interesting? Like how come aside from scalability and those things, like how come you looked at Frost in the first place, and why not some other one?
I guess the main thing is scalability. That was really attractive. You know, the idea of having a single shard is kind of cool. But another thing that it has, now it's not the case that no other threshold signature algorithms have this, but I think a lot of the major ones don't have this protection. Our old one did, but the protection is against attack where if you can run many signatures in parallel. So say you start doing an MPC signature and then you start, before that finishes, you start many other ones, say like, I think on the order of like 200 of them. There's actually an attack where you can sign an arbitrary piece of data, which is like pretty bad attack in the sense that like that's pretty catastrophic. And I think a lot of threshold signature algorithms don't protect against that. So theoretically, if someone knew that what they were doing and they could start 256 simultaneous signatures or even less than that potentially, then they could like, craft a malicious signature and, do whatever they want with it. They could like, sign a transaction that just drains all the funds or something. But Frost is protected against this attack. You can run as many signatures in parallel as you like, and the attack doesn't work. That's also a cool feature of it. But like I said, our old system had that feature as well. But it's definitely something that you'd like to have.
Yeah, and so we use MPC together with Shamir secret sharing. Is that still how it would work?
Yeah, I mean, it's not exactly how I would put it, because I mean, Shamir secret sharing is kind of like the basis for the MPC. It's like a fundamental aspect of it. So it's not like two separate things necessarily.
No, okay, yeah, because before we had when we documented the first round 1.0, so if you had control over 1/3, you could sort of use those secret shares to derive the full private key. But now
Yep.
It seems like we're talking about you would need 50%. So how does that? How do we get this big boost?
That's a good point. In our old algorithm, the techniques we used sort of limited the threshold to 33%, basically. With Frost, and this isn't unique to Frost, but it's another benefit of Frost, is that you can set the threshold to whatever you like. So I was just using 50% as an example. It's probably a pretty good ballpark figure of what we might like to use. There is just the trade-off that, you could make the threshold 100%,
Yeah.
obviously.
Yeah.
But now that causes liveliness issues. If one person, now you need every single node to participate to complete a signature. And so it would only take one person to not participate to sort of halt the system. So it's kind of like this inverse trade-off between liveliness and security, and 50% is probably a good place to be. You would need 50% of the nodes to be malicious, and you would also need like 50% of them to be completely offline or not participating.
So liveness and so before we could have liveness up to a third, and then
Yeah.
And then there was 2/3 for how was it?
It was a third for both.
A third for both.
The
Okay.
old one.
Okay, so now it's half. It could be half for both.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's that's pretty amazing. We haven't celebrated that too much, but that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, like I said, there are other, like they existed at the time, these sort of signature schemes where you could have an arbitrary threshold. We picked what we did last time with the original version because the liveliness issues for those older options, we didn't really like we didn't like that trade-off. We felt like it would be a bit too easy to halt or slow down the system by not participating. But we've changed our minds slightly a bit on that trade-off, and I think Frost is also maybe slightly better in that regard. I'm not 100% sure. So we're
I mean,
it was mainly we sort of reevaluated the trade-off.
yeah, and the flexibility of being able to set it wherever we want is, that's amazing. Because those things are sort of hard coded in Bitcoin, 51% sort of, yeah, because if you get that, then you can control the chain. But
yeah, it's kind of like an emergent property of Bitcoin that it has that security threshold.
Yeah. But we were able to set whatever we want, so that's pretty cool. Because then we could theoretically change it in the future if we found some threshold to be.
Yeah, like we could do 60 or 70% if we decided that we only wanted like 30 or 40% liveliness just to get that extra security,
Yeah.
Because
I think Tendermint, like all the Cosmos chains, I think they are 2/3.
Yeah.
So theoretically we could do that, but that ties into slashing and those kinds of things. Because if people aren't disincentivized if they aren't disincentivized to turn off their nodes, then if they turn off their nodes, then we can face liveness issues. So, have you thought about how to set the incentive/disincentive scheme for nodes participating, making sure that they're staying online? And
no, I haven't discussed that. I don't think there's any decisions being made on that yet. But as you suggest, it's kind of, there's a spectrum, right? If someone sends a completely incorrect message, we can pretty safely say they're being malicious and can slash them. But if they just sort of like didn't respond in time, that's kind of a gray area because they could have been maliciously waiting, or they could just be having bad network, or or some downtime for the cloud provider or whatever. So yeah, there needs to be some care in terms of making sure that people don't get punished for things that they shouldn't get punished for. Still not allowing malicious nodes to sort of continue to act up. So yeah, it's a tricky question, but there's a few ideas like having a reputation. Like if you do make one of these like gray zone mistakes many times, then we can start punishing you. But yeah, all things to sort of work out.
How quick does it, or how long time does it take to do a key rotation, and how sort of challenging is that? Because let's say that the network is noticing that a third of the network isn't responding quick or not at all. Could that be like some kind of threshold to do a new key rotation scheme, and then you would sort of go back up to 100% because only those who participated get to be involved, and you sort of do a dynamic key rotation scheme based on the liveness of the network itself, or is key rotation like very time consuming and it would sort of pause the whole network for a long time?
I mean, I don't think it's not like orders of magnitude slow or anything. It is a bit slower, and we're generally fine with that because you do it once an epoch or whatever.
But could you do
But-
it dynamically based on network health? Let's say that's the term for it.
I mean, yeah, sure. Like this is all like, we decide when, like, we as in like code, the nodes all decide. They've got their program to do whatever you want them to do, right? So there could be something where it's like, we tried a signature 3 times and there was liveliness issues and it failed each time. So now we're gonna create a new key and transfer the funds to that key or whatever. You could, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you like.
So how versed are you in networking? Because I listened to some podcasts on the Bitcoin networking layer, and one kind of attack is called Eclipse attack, where you sort of trick nodes into knowing who are honest nodes. You kind of sort of isolate honest nodes with a layer. Some attacker spins up a bunch of nodes that sort of isolate part of the network, and that way they can trick them into maybe thinking that the network isn't healthy or something. Like how does when you use the Frost MPC, like, do nodes know which nodes are honest and which aren't, and does it keep tabs on all nodes, or can they sort of be eclipsed? Can they be blocked from knowing from other nodes, so they don't see their signatures, so they're
Well, I mean, in general, I guess. Just let me think about that for a moment. I mean, in general, the sort of logic is going to be a bit separated. So the way I'm writing Frost and the way it's sort of written at the moment is, there are it like does message handling, and it does like the cryptographic checks and everything. Then when there's like an error, which is like potentially malicious message or whatever else, you can like report that information, but the system that deals with that information is not like in place yet. So and that's where that sort of logic would happen. It's like, I see that there were like this node presented and like gave a bad message, and these 3 other nodes didn't respond, and whatever. But there'll be all this information that like you would need to decide how to act upon that. I don't know exactly in terms of that specific case of what you were talking about with Bitcoin. Not 100% sure how Bitcoin nodes identify with each other. I don't know if they have like a private key, public key infrastructure with like authenticated secure channels between each node. But if they don't, that is something that we do have in the dark node. So that would mean that, when a dark node is connected to another dark node, they know 100% that they're talking to that dark node. Like there's no, can't trick them to say that you're talking to someone else.
So how do they know that they have 100,000 Ren bonded in a contract? How is that authenticated? Because
I'm not familiar with that part of the system, but I presume there'll be like a registry of some kind on the blockchain. When you register a node, you have a public key identity, and that gets listed in this registry. And the only way to end up in the registry is if you bond 100,000 Ren. Then that public key identity is what you use to, like, when you're talking to other nodes, and you can say, okay, I'm talking to that identity, and in that way be sure that you're talking to like a registered node.
But then let's say there are easier ways to do this, but then sort of theoretically, it might mean that every dark node needs to also operate an Ethereum node so they can verify the registry. Or, I mean, there's probably way more efficient ways to do it, but
Like I said, I'm not 100% sure what what the system will look like, but that's like one way to do it. And yeah, I think the general idea is there would be like a registry somewhere you can look at and see, know that those nodes are registered nodes.
okay, yeah, I think then those kinds of attacks don't apply to Ren like the way they apply to Bitcoin and Ethereum, or at least on Bitcoin, because then there everyone can spin up a Bitcoin full node.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I'm not sure if they have some sort of public-private key authenticated channels setup thing. They might.
I think there's a lot of. I mean, for Bitcoin, at least from what I remember, there's a lot of talk about how you sync your node to the sort of real network, and there's different ways. You can use trusted mechanisms to sync.
Well, something they definitely don't have is like they don't have like a registry like we could have, because since anyone can join, then you sort of need to bootstrap in and figure out who the nodes are. And
but some Bitcoin clients, they have like these seed lists, trusted nodes.
But I have a question. Do you guys, sorry to interrupt, but I was wondering, like, for the dark nodes for RAN 2.0, to run a dark node on RAN 2.0, would it be the same like the RAN tokens for the RAN 1 to run a dark node?
I mean, at least initially, I think we'll keep all the same contracts that we have on Ethereum. So Ethereum would be the registry. So the same, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe that can be internalized in the sort of RAN chain itself, but it's not as far as I know, that's not like a big sort of concern or priority. We can just keep using Ethereum for that.
I see. Yeah. So the same, if one were running a dark node for the RAN 1, I could still run it on RAN 2, basically.
Yeah, but you would need to, I mean, so when we like do the chaos node, for instance, you would either have to bond, like deregister and register a new one, or however, like what
I see.
The way we do that. And the nodes themselves will be running a different software, like different software. So you would have to like redeploy nodes.
I see.
Yeah.
So basically, I would just update the software and run no new tokens that needs to be acquired before to run the RAN 2 nodes.
Yeah, the same RAN tokens could be used to do
I see. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah, sorry to interrupt you guys there.
No worries. No.
Yeah.
Also getting a bit.
Yeah, you should have. We were just sort of like rambling back and forth, I think.
But yeah, does anyone have any last question? Because we have to wrap up.
Yes, was very interesting, and thanks, Ross, what you're talking. So my question is, but you said it's about 10 transactions a second, but that's quick enough for all the apps on RAN 2.0 catalog and everything else, or that can be a little bit given a problematic and something else was, or you said no, that's more than fast than you need.
Well, I guess to reiterate the sort of metrics I was talking about, that's kind of like the very base level. If you just did, every transaction that comes in, you just do it with one signature and you do them sequentially, sort of thing. Whereas I think there are lots of ways to either do things in batches or in parallel, or have one signature actually represent many transactions and these sort of things. So, or even potentially having sharding is like a more complicated solution. So that metric was like a very almost like a worst case, I suppose, for very many nodes. So yeah, like it's important to keep in mind that there are ways to speed that up significantly, I believe.
Yeah, we can't know sort of the TPS of Ren EVM, if that's what you're wondering, because we still have to decide how those transactions are sort of authenticated by the core MPC layer. So say 10 TPS is just for Ren MPC signatures. That doesn't have to be that then Ren EVM only can do 10 TPS. That could be batched and have way higher numbers. And yeah, it depends on how many nodes you have in the network, and if you want to do sharding, and how scalable or how powerful the nodes are themselves. So don't take 10 TPS like as some number that's real. Like it can be way higher depending on how the system is
Okay.
done.
And there's also, I guess, kind of like a slightly more complex in some cases, like if you are depositing funds to a gateway. I believe we consider like the deposit completed and that we can start, minting, the wrap token or whatever, or doing whatever else on the other side once the funds arrive in the gateway. And in that case, no signature is required on the Ren side. You will eventually need to produce a signature to move those funds from the gateway to like the main wallet, but that doesn't have to happen before like that transaction can have an effect. So it's sort of like, yeah, it's also complicated in the way it depends on the use cases.
Okay. Yeah, okay. No, I understand. Thanks.
Good.
Thank you for your time, for your questions, and thank you
Yes, thank you
so
much for your answers, and Ross.
Yeah, thank you,
I'm very
Ross,
excited
for being here. That
for
was
when
an
to
unexpected deep dive into Frost, which was amazing. So
That's all good.
I'll
Like I said, I just saw the call pop up and thought I'd drop in.
yeah. So I'll post this on YouTube and let people know if they want to know more about it. They can just listen to this. We don't have to write any docs. No, I'm joking. We still need to write proper docs, but this was awesome. Thank you so much, Ross.
Yes, thank you. Bye.
All good.